So you've all voted for Elemer of the Briar as our next cosplay build, and I can safely say that this boss is a Jedi Master, capable of swinging his sword around in midair like a toy. But can we do that? No. The answer is no. But I'm still keen to see how strong his cosplay could be, despite us having a far inferior version of his weapon, moveset, and of course whether any improvements could be made along the way. But I'm bite-sized otaku, so let me give it to you bite-sized. So we'll start off by checking out our drip, which consists of the Briar set, with protruding thorns and clamps of metal giving us good defensive stats, but disappointing poise. And I'd admit I was expecting far higher poise values, considering the boss is sturdier than a Nokia phone, and that armor is quite big. The armor also deals damage when rolling into enemies, and the damage amount is quite minuscule, but useful for killing skeletons permanently. Then we have the Marvia's Executioner Sword, which is notorious for being a PvE powerhouse. It comes with the weapon art Eochad's Dancing Blade, but I like to call it Eco-Chad, because this will turn any enemy into a wine bottle, as we twist for continuous damage, which also stacks with other items that benefit from continuous hits. And lastly, we have the Briar Great Shield, which uses the weapon art Shield Bash, and this comes with built-in bleed, which fits the weapon art perfectly, allowing us to block incoming damage and retaliate with our own. My stats are up on the screen, where I've opted to split the strength and arcane due to our weapon benefiting from both, and what you could describe as a fancy quality build on a level 137 hero. But now, let's take it out for a literal spin. The weapon art Eochad's Dancing Blade melts bosses with high damage output at the cost of being prone to damage if the enemy doesn't stagger, alongside a long wind-up time that's more telegraphed than Popeye's punch. Our moveset is what you would expect from a shorter greatsword, with sweeps and overhead swings, but our damage output that's split between physical and magic isn't anything special. In fact, I would argue that in PvE, outside of this weapon skill, it's inferior to other greatswords that have swappable weapon arts, infusions, greases, and greater reach. But our shield is useful for both blocking and retaliating damage from bosses, unless they are in the middle of a combo, in which you are likely to get hit once we lower our shield, making this a risky move unless you're trying to finish off a boss with that last sliver of health. Then looking at PvP, this weapon's short range becomes extremely apparent when trying to strike enemies in front of you, requiring you to have to chase them around the arena to deal damage. Our damage output is quite disappointing, and due to our low poise, we're likely to get staggered if we don't land the first strike. Our shield is more useful, being able to dish out decent damage while protecting our health, which is useful for punishing aggressive enemies or finishing off low health players. But be aware that we aren't entirely immune to damage at certain angles, so be careful when using this. But of course, this build isn't without its issues. Our attacks have short reach, despite being faster than other greatswords, making it difficult to hit our enemies. Our weapon art is slow, so we can't entirely depend on it, and of course our damage output could be better with a revised loadout. I'd say that in PvE, the build in its vanilla form works well, but in PvP, expect to get your ass beat by more optimized and varied setups. So let's make some adjustments. I'm going to infuse our Briar Great Shield with bleed, so we can bump up those values, and let's add in a secondary weapon called the Regalia of Eochad, which will provide us with a fast sword moveset with a weapon art that's the exact same as our Marvia's Executioner's Blade, allowing us to respond far quicker to enemies. Let's throw in the scaled gauntlets and the Knight Cavalry leggings for improved defense and poise, and for our talismans, let's stack all of our damage boosting equipment, such as the Shard of Alexander, the Millicent's Prophesis, and the Rotten Wing Sword insignia, which will stack for increased damage, and the Bullgoat's Talisman for extra poise. And of course, our stats will change to reflect our new setup, where I will opt for greater arcane, as our sword benefits more from arcane than strength, and higher endurance so we can carry our equipment on a level 137 hero. And this is a major improvement to our build from our previous setup. Our shield will now deal more bleed build up than before, allowing us to punish players with a big burst of damage where we can trigger the effect. You may notice some improved poise depending on what the opponent is using, but the bulk of our benefits will come from our sword, which we can swing to punish enemies for great damage far quicker than our greatsword can, while our greatsword will have its weapon art's damage increased by a hefty amount, useful for melting enemies' health if you land the attack at the right time. And by adding a simple sword and some talismans, you should be able to counter most setups with medium range attacks and close range slashes, which will hopefully cover your bases, while allowing the shield bash to finish off enemies with low health or punish aggressors with damage and bleed build-up. This improvement works well, and I would highly recommend this build for both PvE and PvP. As a footnote, you could use Lifesteal Fist for the boss's grab attack, but but I've opted to leave it out as I didn't want to use an extra fist weapon on this character's design. But to wrap things up, I'll leave you with some arena battles and a boss fight so you can see the build in its entirety. But of course leave your comments below and subscribe as we pass the 1000 subscriber mark. This is Bite Sized Otaku and I hope you enjoyed.